Hi everybody, just going to show you this recent game of mine which demonstrates the 150 attack in the Pirc defense. So I'm playing white, and I open with e4 and get d6, which normally suggests you're going to get Pirc defense. d4, knight to f6, we see why d6 is played, it's to stop e5, which often appears in the Pirc defense. Knight to c3, and then black's going to fianchetto on the king side. Now, because he's going to place his dark squared bishop on g7, white is going to try and exchange that off by playing bishop to e3 and then queen d2 behind it, and then we can play bishop to h6 later, exchange those bishops, and then we can also try and get a pawn storm going on the king side, weaken his king position and checkmate the opponent. Obviously it's not that easy, but that's the main idea. So on move 4 I could just play bishop e3 straight away. Sometimes you might see knight g4 and just play bishop to g5 then, but I play f3 first, so that stops the knight coming to g4 after I've developed the bishop to e3, and it also helps prepare g2 to g4, and g2 to g4 helps h2 to h4 and then h4 to h5. So bishop to g7, bishop e3, kingside castled, queen d2. So this is the standard setup for the 150 attack. Now black plays e5. There's a couple of things I could do here. I could just play d5, or I could exchange on e5. The point being that this pawn on e5 is blocking his dark squared bishop, so I could leave him with a bad bishop by exchanging on e5, but I just decided to carry on with the 150 attack idea of a kingside attack. So a castle queen side. So we've got opposite side castling. I'm going to attack on the king side, and black should be trying to attack on the queen side. Normally black would do this by playing c6 and then b5, putting his pieces behind the pawns on the queen side and trying to open up my position over here. So black takes on d4, which is probably the best move, gets rid of that pawn out of the way of his bishop. I capture with the bishop, and then knight to c6. Now because I want to exchange his dark squared bishop for the bishop on g7, I'm not going to allow him to snap it off with his knight, so I drop the bishop back to e3. So I've lost a move here by having to capture and then bring the bishop out of harm's way, but I wasn't too concerned about this because this knight is misplaced here. As I said, he wants to be playing c6 or at least a6 and b5, and this knight's going to get in the way of his own pawns here. Normally this knight will go to d7 and then to b6 once his pawn's gone b5. So although I've lost a move here, he's slowing his own attack down. Bishop to e6, which is natural, and then just g4, and I'm preparing h4, h5. Now he plays a poor move here, plays knight to b4. I'll just show you, if we go back a step actually, if I played h4, black could just play h5, and that would make it much more difficult for me to play g4. I'd have to prepare that a bit more. So I played g4 first. Now if he plays h5, then I just play h3. He can't exchange on g4 because he'd be opening that h file against himself, and I'm just going to maneuver this knight to f4, and then I'm going to be able to exchange and either open the g or the h file. But my opponent played knight b4. I think he realised that this knight was in the way of his pawns, and so thought he could get it out of harm's way with tempo by attacking his pawn. And I did consider just letting him have his pawn and play h4, but then you get knight takes, bishop takes a2, h5 is probably about level, but I've opened up my kingside position. He's going to start playing a5, a4 and get his rook into play, and it's going to be a bit more dangerous, so there's a bit more risk on my side over here. And I'll just point out that you can't do the usual bishop trap here, but b3, because then a5, and after a4 he's going to be able to exchange his pawn. This rook's going to be protecting the bishop, and it's got the open file against my king. And if I play king to b2 trying to win the bishop, that just loses straight away to knight takes e4 check. But just simply a3 forces his knight back. So knight to a6. Now that knight's moved 3 times so far, We've got this bishop on f1 that hasn't moved at all. Sometimes it's a good idea to exchange off a piece that hasn't moved for one that's moved a lot, because you're gaining time in essence. But if I do this, bishop takes, pawn takes, although he's got these horrible double isolated pawns, he's got an open b file for play against my king. Rook b8 or even a queen over. Move this knight out of the way and you've got this bishop bearing down on b2. And as you can see, it's only the king that's defending that at the moment. I don't want to invite an attack on my own king. So that knight's not doing much over there anyway. This bishop on f1, often in the 150 attack, just stays there. If he'd moved his knight to d7 and then to b6, he might have been threatening to play knight to c4, forking this queen and the bishop. And as we want to keep this bishop to exchange it for this one, in that scenario, we'd exchange that bishop for his knight. But as it is, that knight's doing nothing over there. It's my move again, and I just continue with the plan. Knight to e2, threatening to come to either g3 or f4 and support or put pressure on h5. Queen to c8, not a great move. He wants to move his rook over to d8 and start pushing these pawns. I think he also wanted the queen over on the queen side, but I think queen to e7 would be a more natural square. So knight to f4, really easy move. I've got complete control over the d5 square. I've got the option of taking this bishop, but as I said, the main idea is just to pressure h5. So rook to d8. All of black's play here is just too slow. Nothing wrong with that move, but his whole plan's too slow. h4. This is move 14, and already this position is basically winning. I think the computer evaluates this as +3, so I'm going to open up the king side and cause him some real problems. c6 should have been played a long time ago. h5, and now we can see that either the g or the h file is going to be opened. b5. Notice that black's just got no threats over here whatsoever. If his knight was on c7 perhaps, then you get a5 and then b4, and he's going to open the a file and have some counterplay. But as it is, he's got nothing going on there. So exchange h pawn. And we mentioned before that the queen and the bishop often line up like this, and you play the bishop to h6 to exchange off this dark squared bishop. But the queen can also switch over to h2, which is what I did here. And with some h-file threats, obviously we've got to get rid of this bishop and knight first. Black plays b4 here. I can just take that. After knight takes, you can see it's going to take him 1, 2, 3 moves to get that pawn down to a3, and I'm just going to be so much quicker in the attack here. It's my move again, g5. He plays knight to h5 here, which is probably best. If he played knight to e8, then I just play bishop d4 and exchange off the bishops, and then I'm threatening to come in on h8. In fact, in this position I'm already threatening queen to h8, bishop takes queen, rook takes bishop, checkmate. So knight to h5, take the knight, pawn takes. I recapture with a queen here. Perhaps slightly better was just bishop to d4 straight away. We can exchange off the bishops, and he can't defend that h pawn anyway, so I can take it whenever I like. But I took the pawn first, and then best plan for black, just start running with his king. King to f8, bishop exchange, rook takes. I'm attacking the knight, and he plays a5. If he had played c5, which looks quite natural as it's attacking the rook as well as defending the knight, instead of just moving a rook, I play bishop to b5, and that takes away that square, well, these 2 squares from the king. And then if he makes the blunder of taking the rook, then he gets checkmated, queen in, and the rook comes to the back rank. So he plays a5. I'm going to bring the queen in, and king d7. And the simplest plan here is just to play rook to h7 followed by g6, and I'm either winning material or getting a very strong pass pawn. But instead here I played a bit of a sloppy move. I played bishop to h3, and the idea is just that I'm threatening queen takes f7 is mate, and again if he takes a bishop, queen takes f7 is checkmate. but he's got very simple defense. It just helps him out really. King to c7. Notice that this is the 26th move, and it's the first time I've moved that bishop, and it still wasn't the right time to move that bishop. That bishop was much better on f1 still. But there we go. So king c7. I realise that I've made a mistake. I'm not going to exchange on e6 because it'll still be winning for white. If we had exchanges on e6, I'd be only one pawn up, but it's obviously very strong. I can protect the pawn, get these rooks behind it, and I'm going to force promotion ultimately. But my pieces are so much better than black's, I don't want to do any exchanges. My pieces are better than his, so it's not an equal swap. So I play bishop to f5, and then if he did take, I recapture with a pawn, and then I play g6 later, or probably rook h7 first as well. But I played bishop to h5, and he played rook to h8. And here I looked at this line: rook takes, queen takes, and then queen into e7. But after he moves and I capture this pawn, his queen comes in, rook back, and queen takes f3. And this is still absolutely fine for white. White's completely winning. But I didn't want to give him any kind of encouragement. Obviously he's got a knight and a queen fairly close to my king. He might have started to get a few ideas. So I didn't want to give him any counterplay whatsoever. So after rook h8, I played the rook over to d1, threat on d6. And he played d5, which looks fine to start with, but it's actually a mistake. And I'll show you that just by capturing a pawn here, leaving his bishop hanging. Bishop takes, but after d6 check, king moves, d7, I cut off the communication between his queen and his bishop. Now you can see that's a very powerful pawn. The computer actually recommends just queen d8. I'm going to take the bishop. I'd have that very powerful pawn on d7. You can understand why he played bishop takes d7, but letting the rook in was just deadly. King a6, and the king doesn't have too many squares to go to. This knight's guarding b5, so really I just want to get this queen to c4, and that will checkmate the king on the next move. So queen to f4 was the best move, but I make another inaccuracy here, and I play queen takes f7 with winning a pawn, and I've got the queen and the rook on the 7th rank. Looks very strong, and I'm threatening to come to c4, but this gives him queen to g8, and then his queen is protecting the c4 square through my queen. But thankfully he missed that. Obviously white's still winning after that. He played rook to h4. It's a clumsy looking move, trying to guard along the 4th rank, and I just block his view with f4. And then final mistake, queen to b8, and he resigned after queen c4 check. So after king b6 we've got knight a4 checkmate. So there you go. This is a little demonstration of the 150 attack. White's main ideas are just to put a bishop on e3, queen on d2, get a pawn storm going with f3, g4, h4, and then h5. At some point exchange a bishop off, and then try and create mating threats against the black king. And black should be playing c6, b5, getting his knight maybe to d7 and then b6, and then trying to create something against white's king. Obviously in this game it doesn't happen, and it just shows how badly it can go wrong for black if he doesn't create some counterplay quickly. There you go. Hope you enjoyed the game. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thanks for watching.